Neapolitan language, not dialect. And so every time I return to Naples, it feels like I'm going home. I also have to say that for a good part of my teenage years, there was a young woman who refused to requite my love, and that whole tradition of La Canzone Napolitana got me through 10 years of unrequited love, especially Tu che non chiagni, chiagnile me fai. Those songs got me through 10 years. I would like to say that that woman eventually married me. Napoli, yes. So I am in the process, as many of you know, those of you that attended the conference at Naples several years ago, attempting to write a history of Naples that encompasses everything from Vico to Maradona. And so I'd like to propose to you, for the first time, the opening sentences of this perspective book. The title, the tentative title, is not what you see up there, but it's called Dancing on a Volcano in Naples, Scenes from the Siren City. And these are the first sentences. If the myth of Rome begins with fratricide, the myth of Naples begins with suicide. In despair for failing to seduce Ulysses with her siren song, Parthenope threw herself into the Bay of Naples. Ever since, Naples has been a death-haunted city. Now, a friend of mine read that, and she disputed that last sentence because she felt that the idea of a death-haunted city was negative, where I'm trying to show that the city of Naples has a very particular relationship with death, as I will hopefully show in some of these slides. Especially if you've been to Le Fontanelle Cemetery or some of the other places in Naples where there is a particular cult of the dead, and especially the souls, le anime in purgatorio. I also begin with this quote from Antonio Gramsci's notebooks, who wrote, "I've always believed that there is an Italy that we don't know about because we never see it, and which is quite different from the apparent and visible one. In most civilized countries, an abyss separates what you see from what you don't see, but here the abyss is deeper than in any civilized country." And I write, what Gramsci had intuited about Italy is even more true about Naples. Since the reign of the Bourbons, visitors have insisted, "See Naples and die." So wrote Goethe in his Italian Journey of 1816, meaning that when you've seen this city, it's it. You know, you've seen all of life and now you're ready to die. But others, including its own inhabitants, perhaps less charmed by tourists, argue that the correct interpretation of the imperative is that Naples is a city that seems sometimes intent on killing you. Well before 1900, the Romantic poets and the Victorian poets had crafted an image of Naples that endures to this day. We've spoken about the stereotypes. But as a scholar, and I went to Naples several times, you know, I've been going there now for several years, back and forth, with this critical apparatus. As a scholar, I'm going to challenge all these stereotypes. But as we found out last month when we were talking about Calabria here, the question that you sometimes have to ask, what happens when the stereotypes are true? How do you interrogate those stereotypes? In a kind of a contradiction to this elegy of the Romantic poets, like the negative of a photograph, there stands the mirror image of Naples, this kind of negative stereotype they're all familiar with. And while Naples has now enjoyed something of a renaissance since 1994 under the previous administration and the current administration, these two unfolding parallel narratives are indicative of the nature of this kind of paradoxical city. The Neapolitans are fully conscious of this paradox, as revealed in their saying that Naples is un paradiso abitato dai diavoli, a paradise inhabited by the devils. I also think of Jacob Burckhardt in his classic work, The Civilization of the Renaissance in Italy, which he had discerned more than 150 years ago, quote, "The ultimate truth with respect to the character, the conscience, and the guilt of a people remains forever a secret, if only for the reason that its defects have another side. Its defects have another side, where they appear as peculiarities or even as virtues. Hence my interpretation of Naples as a Mobius strip, a twist on Vico's concept of the circularity of history and time. To me, Naples is a city that forces you to reflect on it, and it's a city that forces you to reflect on yourself. A generation ago, my mentor, my friend, my colleague, some of you who knew him, the late cultural anthropologist Thomas Belmonte, spent a year in the Neapolitan neighborhood that he called Fontana del Re. And after his classic work of ethnography detailing that year, The Broken Fountain, appeared in 1979, no one could ever see the city in the same light again. Roberto Saviano's book Amor of 2006, a detailed exploration of the pervasive corruption in Naples, today performs a similar revisioning. How then is one to square the circle of Goethe's breathless panegyric and Saviano's portrait of a corrupt, drug-fueled capitalism? Is it possible to reconcile Shelley's Ode to Paradise with Belmonte's melancholy Broken Fountain? Perhaps it is possible by abandoning a strict Euclidean geometry or Aristotelian logic for the more complex and human understanding and interpretation of a culture, which can embrace the dichotomies embodied by the figure of Pulcinella. Everything and its opposite are true in Naples. A city born in the 7th century of before the Common Era, when the Greeks of Cumae founded Neapolis, the new city. But as with everything else in Naples, there is an alternative myth of origin, that Lucifer, violently expelled from heaven, grasped a small piece of Paradiso as he fell to earth and dropped it at the foot of Vesuvius. It's no coincidence that the Campi Flegrei, to the west of the city, burning with sulfur and underground volcanic fire, have long thought to be the very gates of hell. Or take the example of the explanation for the famous wine of the region. The eternally crafty and ingenious Neapolitans, citizens of the Neopolis and the true sons and daughters of the ancient pagan Greeks, can boast of drinking the lacrimae Christi, the tears of Christ, from grapes grown in the volcanic ash of Mount Vesuvius, the same ash that buried Pompeii and Herculaneum. Legend has it that Christ, in exile on the slopes of Vesuvius, witnessing Lucifer's local destruction, watered the vines on the slopes of the volcano with his tears. And in heaven he was so moved. In classic Neapolitan fashion, the citizens of the city claim that when Jesus ascended into heaven, he was so moved by the beauty of the Bay of Naples that he wept, and his tears rolled down the slopes of the volcano. Naples is a city of negative superlatives and occupies a unique position in the mental